fair warning, I am a massive Xenoblade fan. I've talked about this before, but I absolutely adore the series. So if you were a Xenoblade fan, and I guess an unsuspecting Zelda fan, today's Nintendo Direct was really good. If you weren't either of those things, then I would say it was probably pretty boring for the most part. But not only did we get Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, Switch 2 editions, which, means 4K, 60 FPS, fantastic upgrades, love to see it, but we got a reveal trailer, and a pretty beefy one, for the next Xenoblade game, and it's called Xenoblade Genesis. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to just kind of go through a couple bits of the trailer. I'm not going to have any audio. I just kind of want to show a couple bits of the trailer and things that I find extremely interesting, and I'm really curious about the world itself and, of course, the lore implications that come with it. The first thing to know here is the world itself. It's almost like an inverse of the Animal Crossing trick, where the world kind of bends over backwards. In this case, it kind of bends up. It feels like I'm playing fucking Halo, where the ring just kind of goes up, It feels very similar to that. I'm sure this trope has been done before, but it's such a weird concept to think that, like, this is a world that is wrapped in around itself. It's such a bizarre art style, but I really dig it. It's really interesting. Now, this has really weird implications for, like, the lore of everything. But we're just gonna pretend like the world itself doesn't really matter all that much right now. In terms of, like, geography, nothing really stands out to me, like in this shot, other than, like, big city thing here, and the water in the sky. I do want to talk a little bit about some other stuff too, but I want to focus on the geography for right now. There are some parts that they definitely feel very Xenoblade, definitely like these kind of overhanging cliffs. Monolith loves to do that. Definitely feels like that for sure. And then, of course, we have the going up here in the background again, which is super, super interesting. But then we have this final shot here, which has probably the biggest shot of the world. We have this bit here. And this is the bit that has me really curious. So as the camera pans up, we see these very, very Xenoblade cliffs. And what's so interesting about this is that this line right here on the text here, that vengeance of a fallen god had not yet to be fulfilled. They're saying this line at the same time that they're showing a shot that looks extremely similar, at least geography-wise, to the Bionis shoulder and the Bionis leg. The very characteristic bits of these pieces that kind of went out, and these high up, like, pillars that kind of went with it. You also saw these in Xenoblade X, but they were definitely more known in Xenoblade 1, and I think that's really interesting. There's also a town up here, tiny little town up here. That's really neat. But I think this is really interesting that they would have this line at the same time as they're showing off geography that looks very similar to Xenoblade 1. And I'll talk about my own thoughts here in a minute. We'll take a stop here. There's this cool lava area over here, which is really neat. And then there's this up here. I don't know what any of this is, but it still looks cool. This kind of reminds me of the Bionis arm. Honestly, this area here does. Just the way this is all laid out definitely feels inorganic, which Xenoblade is very good at making geography that feels inorganic, which is fun. It's kind of an oxymoron. But that's the main things I wanted to talk about. Obviously, the new art style is certainly a choice. I quite like it. I like the cel-shaded graphics. It's not my favorite out there. It does feel just a little too, like, basic anime-esque. I don't like it in that sense. However, it is still really good. It's still really nice looking, very full. Oh, and we're totally going to talk about this. Holy shit, we got to talk about this here in a minute. That is very interesting. What are these? Why are these here? Because later they talk about a world lit by 6 stars. However, one of these things is not like the other. Obviously, I think this is like a normal sun. Like, this could just be the sun. These little guys, these are different. Something is going on here, and I don't know what. I can't think of anything in particular that sticks to, like, 5 in the Xenoblade series, or maybe even Xenosaga. I'm sure there's people out there who understand the lore more than I do, but I can't think of anything in particular. This could also just be something entirely new. They did describe this game as a new beginning for Xenoblade, which I think is really cool. However, it is still called Xenoblade. that is important to note. It is still directly tied back to the main series just by name alone. Even Xenoblade Chronicles X is tied back to the main trilogy, in a bit of a loose way, but if you have the definitive edition on Switch 2, or I guess Switch 1 as well, the extra story content they added there fully tied it back to the original trilogy as like a parallel universe. So this brings me to a couple of my theories about what I think the game is. Firstly, on a technical level, I think the game is going to be an interconnected world. I don't know if it's going to be open world, but I do think it's going to be an interconnected one, at least. One where you can see the areas you're going to, very similar to Xenoblade 3. I don't know if they'll go full open world like they did with Xenoblade X. I think that would probably be it would be really cool in a sense, but I also kind of think it would be a mistake. I think Xenoblade's kind of linear worlds are fantastic, and they're really lovely. But I could see both as long as they execute it better than Xenoblade X. I would probably enjoy it. Xenoblade X's open world it's good. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I find it very hard to navigate sometimes. I find it very over daunting. It's very big. It's very overwhelming sometimes. And I'm hoping that if they do decide to do an open world again, that they do something that's a little bit more simple. It's something that's a little bit easier to understand. But yeah, this geography is crazy. There's a shot here. Where was it? This is really cool. Obviously, thematically, this is high fantasy, which is very different than the very kind of like futuristic sci-fi stuff that they've done before. I think Xenoblade 2 was closer to fantasy than any other game that they've done so far, but it's so interesting. They're going full out in the high fantasy, cell shaded. They're going all into it. It does kind of feel like the sort of the ultimate kind of apex of what they've been leaning towards. Each Xenoblade game has been getting more anime looking. You had 1 which looked kind of unique in its style, and then 2 was a little closer to anime, and then I would say that 3 push even further in that direction. And then here we are with Genesis, and it just straight up looks like anime. It just looks like it could be a Fire Emblem game if it wanted to. It doesn't look all that distinct, which is a bit of a shame, because it's like we also saw a trailer for Fire Emblem in this direct, and it's kind of like these two games look very similar. Obviously, I know that Xenoblade is very different mechanically and different in a lot of ways, but I don't know. I feel like there was something unique and charming about the Xenoblade style, the Xenoblade Chronicles style. But as long as this game is good, I can kind of forgive an art style that I'm not super keen on. And I think it's good. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a good art style. I'm just like, I like the other one better, but I can stomach this. So I want to talk about like what I think the actual game is. I've seen a lot of people online calling this game a prequel to the Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy. I don't think this is the case. If you know anything about the Xenoblade lore, you know that Xenoblade takes place on Earth. It just does. That's how it's just Earth, and it all ties back to Xenosaga. You could definitely argue that those two series are connected. Pretty much that's definitive now with Xenoblade 3's DLC. Xenoblade Chronicles takes place on Earth. Both of the games, they kind of take place, at least 1 and 2 take place on like a different split Earth. 3 is kind of the combination of those Earths coming back together, and then of course splitting up again, and then after the ending of 3, we see that they come back together finally. So my personal opinion is that this game is a very distant sequel, or an alternate universe. I would prefer a distant sequel. I would like that a lot more than an alternate universe. I think that a distant sequel could work really well. And I think that something to note throughout this trailer is that there is a lot of fucking purple. There is a lot of purple. We have had an entire game pretty much centered around, we've had a game centered around Numa, of course, Pyra and Mytha, that was a big focus of 2. Malos was lesser of a focus, I would say. He was a big deal, but I would say we didn't have as much focus on him. Of course, Xenoblade 1 was all about Alvis Ontos. It was a very big focus in that. So I think, and I'm hoping, that maybe this game focuses a lot on Malos and whatever happened to the Logos core of the Trinity processor. I think that this line here about a fallen god could refer to Malos. That's very possible. It could refer to Zanza. It could refer to Klaus. It could refer to something else that we don't know about yet. There's a lot here, and that's really interesting. And I think it's fun to theorize about this stuff. Forgive me if you don't know Xenoblade lore. This is so dumb and it makes no sense. But that's my current thought. My current theory is that it's a distant sequel. It's a new beginning for the series. I don't think it's like a prequel in any way, because I think a prequel to the game would probably just be Xenosaga in a sense, because there are cutscenes and stuff in Xenosaga that take place like in like the time of Jesus Christ. There's a lot of biblical references in Xenosaga, and I think this game being called Genesis is very in line for Monolith Soft. Very much a biblical reference. They did it again, lovely. And I think it's important to note that while this game may seem at first disconnected from the original trilogy, it is important to note that Xenoblade Chronicles itself was never meant to be a Xeno game, and it turned out to be their most popular series. And on top of that, I don't think there was any plans originally to tie it back to Xenosaga, but with Xenoblade 3's DLC, that obviously changed. They tied it right back to Xenosaga, with, of course, the now infamous radio scene, and, of course, the direct mention of, what is his name? Dmitry Yuriev. It pretty much like just directly tied it all together, which is really neat and really, really cool. But I think that as this trilogy goes on, the direct links to the Chronicles games will be more apparent. I don't think we'll ever see Rex and Shulk again. I don't think we'll ever see those characters that we love again, except for in a new Smash game. But I do think that their story is done, and I think that we are going to get connections back to the events and things that they did. I think that the work that our characters put in is going to be at least kind of mentioned, right, in some form. And that may not be in this first game in the trilogy. It'll probably be maybe in the second or the third, but I think as it goes on, we will have more of an understanding of how this all ties together. And I think that's great. But at the same time, I don't know how important that is. Is it really that important? I think the story of Xenoblade being tied back with Xenosaga, I think it's pretty well complete. The Earth is back. The people of Xenosaga found Lost Jerusalem now, assuming that was Cosmos, that was there, the little blue light at the end of Xenoblade 3. What else is there really to talk about? It's over. That's the full story. It's kind of like making needless sequels to Star Wars. We don't need it. It doesn't need it. We don't need it. And I could understand a sequel that is completely, different from the rest of the games. And I think that's fine. That's what Breath of the Wild was. Breath of the Wild takes place. Either you believe it takes place at the end of all the timelines, or it's in a separate alternate universe. That's up to you if you want to believe Nintendo's official timeline or not. But Breath of the Wild serves as its own new beginning for the series, and I think that Xenoblade Genesis is going to be the same thing. I think it's going to be a new beginning, a completely separate story with elements from the past. Would it be cool if they tied it back to the Xenoblade Chronicles trilogy? Yeah, that would be sick. But do they have to? Absolutely not. I want to go through this again finally. I want to go back to the trailer here. This art style, I want to kind of end here on this. I am so fucking torn on it right now. I'm just very torn on it because it looks like really good. It's a really good looking game. Even the bits they showed off of like actual looking gameplay, it looks really good. I'm really curious about the combat system, how that's going to work out. Very curious about that. But there was something special with that kind of like weird fantasy sci-fi look. They definitely had a very unique style with Xenoblade games. It wasn't as like serious as something like Final Fantasy VII. It wasn't as fantastical as something as like Dragon Quest. It kind of fit in the middle, and that's really cool. Anyway, that's going to be it for this discussion about Xenoblade Genesis. If you guys like Xenoblade and you want to hear me talk about it more, I probably could, but there are other channels out there that exist that go over the Xenoblade lore. I would recommend like Xenobits or what's his name, Luxin, Luxin. Those are two great channels that talk about Xenoblade lore, and I'm sure they'll have a lot more educated opinions than I will. But I wanted to talk about this game because it was probably my favorite reveal of the entire direct. But if you're a Xenoblade fan, you ate well today. But if you wanted anything else, it was all right. Anyway, okay, that's it for today's video. Love you guys. Be safe.